At 2:17 in the morning, Ethan Walker was standing in his kitchen with a resignation email open on his phone. He had been staring at it for 20 minutes. His job had drained him for years, but leaving felt reckless. He wanted certainty before he moved, a guarantee, a map. Then his old radio, the one he had not switched on in months, crackled to life after a power surge. One sentence came through before the station faded. "You do not need the whole road. You need the next honest step." Ethan froze. Was it a sign? Was it coincidence? Or was it simply a line from a late-night talk show, landing on a mind already desperate for an answer? That question matters more than most people realize, because every day you encounter moments that seem strangely timed. A name appears just as you were thinking of someone. A book offers language for a problem you could not explain. An unexpected conversation brings an opportunity at the exact moment you were ready to quit. Some people call it luck, some call it intuition. Carl Jung called it synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence between an inner state and an outer event. Not necessarily magic, not necessarily proof that an invisible force is arranging traffic lights and song lyrics for you, but meaningful enough to make you pause and ask, what is happening inside me right now, and what might this moment be asking me to see? Today, we are placing the stamp of awareness on your mental framework. This video is about synchronicity, meaningful coincidences, intuition, patterns, and the discipline to act wisely when life gets strange. You will learn why these moments feel so powerful, how to separate insight from fantasy, and how to use them without surrendering your judgment. And stay with me, because we are coming back to Ethan at the end. The choice he made after that radio message will reveal the difference between chasing signs and becoming the kind of person who is ready when an opportunity arrives. The moment when life feels personal. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had a moment that seemed too perfectly timed to ignore? Maybe you were grieving someone and heard their favorite song in a place you never expected. Maybe you were on the verge of applying for something, then met a stranger who described the exact path you had been considering. Maybe you kept seeing a phrase, a symbol, or a topic repeated in different places during a difficult decision. The power is not always in the event itself. The power is in the collision between the event and the question already burning inside you. Jung did not use synchronicity to mean that every repeated number carries an instruction. His idea was more careful. Sometimes two events have no obvious cause and effect relationship, yet they feel connected because of the meaning they create in the observer. As Jung wrote, synchronicity is the coming together of inner and outer events in a way that cannot be explained by cause and effect, and that is meaningful to the observer. That final phrase is essential, meaningful to the observer. Meaning is not a command. A coincidence does not remove your responsibility. It invites reflection. Think about the difference. If you see 11:11 after deciding to start a business, a reckless mind says, "The universe guarantees I will win." A disciplined mind says, "This moment reminds me of the goal I have been avoiding. What is one practical action I can take today?" One response turns meaning into superstition, the other turns meaning into momentum. A short story. Claire Morgan was a 29-year-old graphic designer who wanted to leave a toxic relationship. For months, she waited for a dramatic sign that would make the decision easy. She saw repeating numbers, heard songs about freedom, and treated every coincidence as evidence, but she still stayed. Then one evening, her younger sister asked, "If I were in your position, what would you tell me?" That was the moment Claire finally listened. Not because the question was supernatural, but because it exposed the truth she had already known. The real sign was not a number on a clock, it was the clarity she had been postponing. Think about it. Sometimes the pattern outside you is only powerful because it points toward a pattern inside you. Why your mind notices patterns. Your brain is a meaning-making machine. It is always scanning the world for what matters: danger, opportunity, familiarity, belonging, reward. You do not notice every blue car, every phrase, every face, or every number. You notice what your attention has marked as important. Buy a particular car, and suddenly you see it everywhere. Start thinking about moving to a new city, and you notice articles, conversations, and opportunities connected to that city. This does not mean those things appeared because you thought about them. Often, they were already there. Your attention simply brought them into focus. That does not make your experience meaningless. It makes it useful. When your mind repeatedly notices something, ask 3 questions. What does this pattern represent to me? What decision am I avoiding? And what evidence would I need before acting? That 3rd question keeps you grounded. The healthiest relationship with synchronicity combines openness with discernment. You can be curious without becoming gullible. You can value your intuition without abandoning facts. The philosopher Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." A coincidence may arrive uninvited, but your interpretation and response are still your responsibility. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button. Thank you for your support. Mindset Stamps is here to help you build a mind that is alert, disciplined, and impossible to manipulate by fear, distraction, or false certainty. The story of the golden beetle. Jung himself described a case that became famous. A patient told him about a dream involving a golden scarab. During the session, Jung heard tapping at the window. He opened it and caught a beetle that closely resembled the image from her dream. He did not present the event as a laboratory proof of a cosmic code. What mattered was its psychological effect. The unlikely timing broke through the patient's rigid resistance and made her willing to consider a new perspective. That is a more mature way to understand synchronicity. The question is not, can I use this coincidence to predict the future? The question is, what has this moment unlocked in me? Maybe a pattern reminds you to call your father. Maybe it brings you back to the book you need to finish. Maybe it exposes how often you are ignoring your own exhaustion. Maybe it gives you the courage to take one reasonable step toward the life you say you want. A coincidence becomes dangerous only when you hand it the steering wheel. It becomes valuable when you let it illuminate the road while you remain the driver. Claire learned this slowly. After leaving her relationship, she began journaling every time she experienced a sign, but she added 2 columns, emotion and action. Beside each event, she wrote what she felt and what measurable step she took. Within a month, she saw something surprising. The signs were not predicting her future. They were showing her where she had energy. Whenever she felt alive, curious, or brave, she noticed more possibilities. Whenever she felt frightened, she noticed only threats. Her outer world had not suddenly become magical. Her inner world had become more honest. The difference between intuition and impulse. Not every strong feeling is intuition. Not every coincidence deserves action. This is where many people lose themselves. Impulse is urgent, loud, and hungry for immediate relief. It says, quit today, text them now, spend the money, prove something, chase the rush. Intuition is often quieter. It may be uncomfortable, but it does not need to scream. It returns consistently. It aligns with your values, and when you test it against reality, it does not demand that you ignore obvious risks. The Stoics understood this discipline. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. Your thoughts are not automatically truth just because they arrive with intensity. They require examination." Here is a practical test. When a coincidence feels significant, do not rush. Write it down. Wait 24 hours if the decision is not urgent. Then ask, what was I thinking about immediately before this happened? What does this event mean to me personally? Does acting on it require me to ignore evidence, boundaries, or common sense? What small, reversible step could I take instead of making a dramatic leap? That final question is gold. You do not need to quit your job because you saw a motivational quote on a billboard. You can update your resume, contact one mentor, save 3 months of expenses, or build a skill after work. Meaning should lead to movement, not madness. A short story about the door that did not open. 2 years before Ethan stood in that kitchen, he had applied for a promotion he wanted badly. He did everything right, or so he thought. He worked late, smiled through exhaustion, and convinced himself the promotion would validate his worth. He did not get it. For weeks, he read the rejection as a message that he was not good enough. Then, through a former colleague, he learned that the position required constant travel and would have destroyed the relationship with his young son that he was trying to repair. Was losing the role fate? Maybe, maybe not. But Ethan's original interpretation was wrong because it came from insecurity. The event did not define him. It redirected his attention. This is why you must not worship every closed door. A setback can be information without being a verdict. Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." When you know your deeper why, you stop treating each disappointment as the end of the story. Synchronicity is not about escaping struggle. It is about noticing what struggle is trying to teach you, the science of attention and the mystery that remains. There are grounded reasons why meaningful coincidences can feel more frequent during major life changes. When you are searching for a new direction, your attention becomes highly sensitive to relevant information. Your brain prioritizes cues connected to your concerns. This can make the world feel as if it is speaking more loudly. Psychology calls part of this selective attention. It is not an insult. It is a feature of a mind that cannot process everything at once. But reducing the experience to just your brain can also miss the point. A meaningful coincidence can be psychologically real, even if it is not supernatural. If a sentence, meeting, song, or unexpected delay causes you to recognize a truth you were avoiding, the impact is real. The decision it helps you make can change your life. Jung warned against a narrow certainty that assumes only one way of knowing is valid. He wrote, "We must remember that the rationalistic attitude of the West is not the only possible one and is not all-embracing, but is in many ways a prejudice and a bias that ought perhaps to be corrected. That is not an argument against reason. It is an argument for humility. Use data, seek advice, notice your emotions, test your assumptions, leave room for mystery without calling every mystery a miracle." Drop this affirmation in the comments. I notice the pattern, but I choose the wise action. How to read the signal without losing yourself. Here is the framework. Pause, interpret, verify, act. First, pause. Do not turn every unusual event into an emergency. Breathe. Observe what happened without instantly assigning a cosmic explanation. Second, interpret. Ask what the event touches in your life. Is it grief, ambition, fear, a relationship, a dream you have delayed for too long? The meaning is often connected to the emotional charge already present. Third, verify. Look for real-world evidence. If you feel guided toward a career change, research the industry. If you feel called to reconnect with someone, consider whether the relationship is safe and mutual. If you feel an idea repeating in your mind, build a small experiment. Fourth, act, not with blind faith, with deliberate courage. A 34-year-old teacher named Daniel Reed experienced this during a difficult season. He wanted to start a channel about helping young men develop discipline, but he was embarrassed by the idea. In 1 week, 3 different people asked him for advice about routines and confidence. Then he found an old notebook containing video ideas he had written years earlier. Daniel could have called it a sign. Instead, he called it a pattern worth testing. He recorded one video, then another. He did not assume success was guaranteed. He built evidence through action. 6 months later, the channel was not famous, but it was real. People were being helped. The coincidence did not create the outcome. His consistency did. That is the stamp. Awareness without action is entertainment. Awareness with action becomes transformation. When synchronicities increase, people often report more meaningful coincidences during transitions, after a breakup, before a major move, during grief, while building a new identity, or when they finally stop living on autopilot. Why? Because transition breaks your routines, it creates space. And when the old identity no longer fits, you become more able to see options that were invisible before. But transition can also make you vulnerable. When you are lonely, anxious, or desperate for direction, you may force meaning onto random events. You may believe a sign tells you to return to someone who repeatedly harmed you. You may mistake a temporary high for a life purpose. This is why your standards matter. Any interpretation that asks you to abandon your health, values, finances, safety, or self-respect is not wisdom. It is wishful thinking wearing a spiritual costume. The ancient Greek maxim, "Know thyself," remains one of the most powerful tools for interpreting any sign. Know your patterns, know where you chase validation, know the stories you use to avoid responsibility, know the fear that makes you call hesitation intuition. If you do that work, synchronicity becomes less about external permission and more about internal alignment. The daily practice of awareness. Try this for the next 7 days. Keep a synchronicity journal. Each time an unusual coincidence catches your attention, write down the date, the event, your immediate thought, your emotional state, and one grounded action you can take. Then return to it after a week. You may discover that certain patterns arise whenever you are tired, isolated, or avoiding a difficult conversation. You may see that your strongest insights come after walks, silence, prayer, meditation, or focused work. You may discover that you do not need more signs. You need more stillness. Lao Tzu wrote, "To attain knowledge, add things every day. To attain wisdom, subtract things every day." Most people are too noisy to hear themselves think. They consume advice, scroll endlessly, and wait for the universe to shout over the chaos. But clarity often arrives after subtraction, less distraction, fewer empty promises, more solitude, more honest work. If you want to become someone who recognizes opportunity, train your attention, sleep enough, keep your word, read, walk without headphones, spend time with people who tell you the truth. Make decisions that your future self will respect. That is not mystical, that is mental toughness. The final choice, Ethan's answer. Let's return to Ethan in the kitchen at 2:17 in the morning. That radio sentence stayed with him. You do not need the whole road. You need the next honest step. For years, Ethan had waited for a perfect sign to leave his job. He wanted a message that would erase uncertainty. But that night, he finally understood something. Maybe no external event could make the decision for him. Maybe the coincidence mattered because it named the principle he had been resisting. He did not send the resignation email, not that night. Instead, he wrote a plan. He set aside money. He contacted 2 people in the field he wanted to enter. He spent an hour each evening building a portfolio. He told his son what he was working toward and began keeping the promises he made. 4 months later, a former client called with a contract that matched the work Ethan had been preparing for. Was that synchronicity? Perhaps. But the greater truth was this. When opportunity arrived, he was no longer merely wishing, he was ready. That is what meaningful coincidences can offer at their best. Not a substitute for effort, Not a guarantee, not a reason to surrender your mind. A moment of recognition, a mirror, a nudge toward the responsibility you already know is yours. Do not live asleep inside your own life. Pay attention to what repeats. Pay attention to what energizes you. Pay attention to the questions that keep returning after the noise has faded. Then bring your courage to the answer. Carl Jung wrote that synchronistic events almost invariably accompany the crucial phases of the process of individuation. In plain language, the moments that feel meaningful often arrive while you are becoming more fully yourself. So when life gives you a strange and perfectly timed moment, do not rush to label it. Do not dismiss it either. Pause, reflect, verify, move. Maybe the pattern is not telling you that the universe owes you a future. Maybe it is reminding you that your future is asking something from you now. One last principle: keep your feet on the ground. There is a final discipline to remember. Do not confuse attention with obsession. You do not need to search every receipt, license plate, or song lyric for a hidden instruction. A mind that is constantly hunting for signs can become anxious and lose contact with the life directly in front of it. The strongest people are neither cynical nor credulous. They are present. They can appreciate a meaningful moment without needing to prove it to anyone. They can hear a message in an experience, then return to the work, the training, the study, the difficult apology, the saved money, the early morning, the promise kept when nobody is watching. This is why synchronicity should make you more responsible, not less. If a moment reminds you of your purpose, honor it with a habit. If it reveals a relationship you value, honor it with honesty. If it exposes a fear, honor it by facing the next manageable step. Do not wait for life to become perfectly clear. Clarity is often earned in motion. As you act with integrity, you begin to recognize which opportunities belong to you and which distractions only look like destiny. Which stamp are you adding to your mindset today? Tell me in the comments.